What's good, YouTube? My name is Coach, and in today's video we're going to be going over the rest of the commanders. This is part 2 of the commander collection. If you had not watched part 1, you can go back and watch part 1. However, we're just going to be going over all the commanders that were not mentioned in that video, okay? If you are not subscribed to this channel already, you do not have to subscribe to this channel. I am just genuinely grateful that you chose to click on this video and are watching this video, so thank you for being here. I genuinely appreciate it. The first commander that we're going to go over is Hitotsugu, Devouring Chaos. This commander is on the channel already, so if you want to go back to the channel and watch a Dech Tech for this commander, it already exists, so you can watch that. The next commander we have here is Satoru Umizawa. This is another commander that I have on the channel. This is a zombie ninja tribal commander deck. You're more than welcome to click on my channel to watch the rest of the videos that I have for this. I actually have a playlist for this commander as well. Next commander we have here is Tatsunari Toad Rider. This is another commander that we recently built on a live stream on the channel. We do build decks live on this channel. And this is about ninjutsu, mutate, and enchantments. It's actually pretty fun. I like Tatsunari. This commander's cool. Next commander we have here is Tanos, Urzas Apprentice. This deck is just about protecting your life total as much as possible. And it's a minor dragon sub-theme because some dragons have to have interactions with artifacts. And this deck is really just looking to go infinite and just have infinite turns. Next commander we have here is Willowdusk, Essenseer. There's nothing really special about this commander deck. It's just about making one creature very strong by paying a ton of life. We have a ton of cheap to cast creatures that have built-in evasion like trample or flying, so that the creature that you're putting the counters on are not so valuable. However, because they have powerful keywords, it's just difficult to stop. And it feels bad to cast removal on those creatures just because they're just weak, like 2 mana flying creatures. But it just forces your opponents to use all of their removal. Next commander we have here is Layla, Artful Provocateur. This is just a artifact and enchantment tribal based deck. You know, every time you cast an enchantment or artifact, you create a 1/1 flying token. And this deck plays a lot of enchantments that allow you to take your opponent's creatures and take your opponent's permanents. So not only are you stealing your opponent's things, you get to keep your opponent's cards, and then you create a token, and it's just pretty strong. Layla's really a really good commander. Next commander we have here is Pramikon, Sky Rampart. This is a cycling commander deck. This is actually the one commander deck that creates the 2/2 cat tokens every time you draw your second card per turn. I forgot what the commander's name was, but I just put Pramikon as the commander for that deck just because when I played that cycling deck, it just drew so much attention from my opponents that it was just difficult to win. So playing Pramikon as the commander allows me to protect my life total. The next commander we have here is Ludovic, Necro Genius. This is just a reanimator style deck, and we're reanimating, you know, Phyrexian Praetors. There are creatures that you can turn Ludovic into that allows you to one-shot your opponents. This is just your basic self-mill Dimir deck. Nothing special here. Next commander we have is Riel, the Everwise. This commander deck is all about just discarding cards to draw cards to then attack with Riel, as she's unblockable, we'll say. Next commander we have here is Rith, the Awakener. Rith is a landfalling anthem tribal deck. There's a ton of anthems inside this deck, and a ton of ways to put lands into play so that we can create a ton of creature tokens that get buffed by the anthems that we put into play. Next commander we have here is Sakiko, Mother of Summer. This is basically just mono green, just put a ton of really powerful creatures with trample into play and then deal a ton of damage to your opponents to then gain a ton of mana to then use that mana to put bigger creatures into play. This deck is actually, because you create mana when you deal damage to your opponents, sometimes your opponents will actually attack your opponents for you to remove them from the game so that you're not able to create the mana from Sakiko. It's a pretty interesting commander. I really like Sakiko. Next commander we have here is Silvar and Trin. This is a deck that's focused on stealing your opponent's creatures and sacrificing them and just creating an army of creatures to be sacrificed with Silvar. We play cards like Conspiracy to turn all your creatures into humans so that we can use cards like Blood Artist to remove your opponent's creatures. And Silvar just works as a win condition as well because Silvar can give himself indestructible. So it's a pretty strong commander deck. I legitimately believe that human tribal commander deck that these cards were featured in, I think that these two were meant to be the commanders for that deck. The next commander we have here is Zergo Helm Smasher. This is a board wipe tribal commander deck. This is a really mean commander deck. I rarely play this commander deck. It's just, you just wipe out all the creatures all the time and just attack with Zergo constantly. Next commander we have here is Chainer Nightmare Adept. This is a Spectre tribal commander deck. Chainer gives your creatures haste when they enter the battlefield from the graveyard. So you'll cast the Spectre, you'll discard a Spectre, cast it from your graveyard, attack with haste, and force your opponents to discard cards. Spectres, when they deal damage, cause your opponents to discard cards. Next commander we have here is Marin of Clan Nel Toth. This is one of the first commanders I ever had. This is just your basic Marin deck. It's really just about building a combo or a board state where every time you force an opponent to sacrifice a creature, you create a token that allows you to sacrifice that token to force everyone to sacrifice a creature so that you then create a token, and it just turns into this thing where nobody can maintain a board state because you can infinitely sacrifice creatures in response to them playing creatures. Next commander we have here is Savin, the Chronoclasm. This commander deck is all about putting creatures that when they enter the battlefield deal damage to your opponents, copying them, and then just dealing 300 damage to your opponents out of nowhere. Next commander we have here is Karth, the Lion. This deck is all about planeswalkers. This deck has Vorinclex. This deck has Doubling Season, and you just play planeswalkers and just control the game. Next commander we have here is Obun, Moldaya Ancestor. This is just a basic Obun deck. There's really nothing too special about this commander deck. It's just about putting lands into play. I play a ton of anthems inside this Obun deck so that when Obun turns a land into a creature, the creature receives Obun's power, and then because it's a creature now, it then receives the buff from the anthem again. So it's a nice little interaction with anthems that you receive with Obun. Next commander we have here is Galia, the Kindler of Hope. You are more than welcome to watch the videos for Galia I have on the channel already. Next commander we have here is Morag, the Fury of Akum. This commander deck is about stealing your opponent's creatures and sacrificing them, and then having cards that trigger upon the beginning of combat so that when you are able to have multiple combats during a turn, you just trigger those cards multiple times. Usually the cards will say something like at the beginning of combat, give target creature +2/+0 or something like that, so that you can, over the course of that turn, give that creature +4/+0, +6/+0. This deck, what I've seen online is a lot of people look to just get as many combats as they can. What I find is, just having one turn where you have 2 combat phases can generally take people out of the game. So it's more about just waiting on the right time to initiate the extra combats as opposed to constantly triggering the extra combat steps. Next commander we have here is Croesus, the Purger. This is just a Planeswalker Grixis style deck, a ton of cards like Nico Bolas. Next commander we have here is Saheli, the Gifted. This is just a X-Tribal Saheli, just to create a ton of artifacts, Blightsteel Colossus type deck. Next commander we have here is Feather, the Redeemed. This is just your basic Feather deck. It's really a prowess deck where we're playing a ton of creatures that are really cheap to play that trigger off of prowess, so that as we're targeting Feather with these spells, we're also dealing damage with a bunch of really small creatures. And that's going to be all the commanders that we're going to go over now. If you want to see the rest of the commanders in the collection, you can click on this video right here, okay? Peace.